Hi, Whitecappers. This is Mrs. Carson. In our writing workshop this week, we've talked about how a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, in the study of geography, think of maps as being worth 1,000,000 words, or even more. Maps are the language of geography, and the mother of all maps is the globe. The globe is a great way to see that we are limited on the Earth in terms of how much terrestrial space we have. About 70% of the surface of our planet is water or ice, and much of the land is mapped as mountains or desert. So we really don't have that much room to live on. A globe can also show us that really the shortest way from the United States to China is not across a long Pacific Ocean, but over a little bit of the Bering Sea in Alaska. And finally, maps are really just stories in disguise. The map maker has control over what kind of story they want to tell. And from looking at these two pictures on this page, you can see that there are two totally different stories that these maps are telling. So let's think of a map as a story and the map maker as an author. Okay, map making is actually called cartography. And there's a lot that goes into cartography. It's a combination of storytelling, art, and science. You can tell a story with a map, or you can get a story from looking at an old map. And a map will show you what was important to the person who made it at a particular time. Can you guess what this is a map of? What continent? Also a country? If you guessed Australia, you're right. And obviously this person has a very good sense of humor. This is a very funny map. Taking a look at this map, what do you see? I see things that are associated with different countries sometimes. There are lots of drawings here, and all the drawings try to fit the shape of the continent or country they're in. Obviously, they didn't include everything. And there are a lot of stereotypes. Okay? There are generalizations as to what's important to a country or what the people look like in a country. Russia is not full of blondes holding vodka drinks, and Africa is not full of people wearing diamond earrings. But it does tell us that in Russia, vodka is popular as a drink, as an alcohol, and in Africa, they're known for their diamond mines, okay, amongst some other things that are in that picture. So this is someone's cartoon version, telling an interesting story. I don't know if I agree with all of it, but it's there. Now, people have been making maps for over 5,000 years. Ancient Mesopotamians scratched grooves in moist clay to represent rivers and fields, and then they let the sun bake it into clay tablets. Explorers would go out seeking new lands, and then they would create maps of their discoveries and bring them back. So, maps have been around for a very long time. And one of the very first types of maps that people put together was the concept of the fact that at some point, maybe all the continents fit together into one great continent. I'm sure you've heard of this idea of Pangaea. And if you look at that picture on the right, you can see how it does look like the continents fit together, and then over time they have drifted apart. Now, at first it was just a drawing, but then scientists started to find evidence for this. And if you look at that picture on the left side, that's a map showing some places in the world that have diamond mines. And you'll notice that there are a lot of diamond mines in Africa. And in South America, in that space that would fit right tucked into Africa, you see that there are diamond mines. And they found out that the same types of diamonds are found on the west coast of Africa as are found on the east coast of South America. And that leads you to, therefore, say we have evidence to prove that, yes, at one point they were touching because they share the same minerals. And this has happened a lot. We found evidence of this type of commonality along the coasts of a bunch of different continents. Now, not all stories are good stories, and not all maps are good maps. There are some maps that show people's bad intentions. So here is a map from 1939, and this is done right at the beginning of World War II, when Nazi Germany and Hitler started to make plans to take over Europe. You don't have to be able to read any German to see that their plans were not only to spread across Europe, that black color, also into the Soviet Union, where you see the black stripes and the arrows pointing to the right, up into the Greenland, okay, the Arctic area, and to the left. And what's to the left of Europe? Across the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, we have the United States. So when governments start issuing maps with the neighboring lands listed as their own, you need to look out, because that means they have intentions to do something. And a lot of times these maps come out before the aggression even begins. If you have a look at this map, at the entire stretch of boundary between China and India, in any major world atlas, you'll see trouble from one end to the other. In the east, China's issue is that they claim a whole bunch of land to be theirs. China's line ends at the eastern border of Bhutan. And in the west, China controls 3 areas on the border of Kashmir that's currently claimed by India. So we need to keep track of what countries are claiming as their own on borders, because that's where border disputes can turn into wars. When geographers are asked to provide early examples of the practical use of maps in solving a real-world problem, we like to go back to the story of Dr. John Snow. He was a London doctor. He was also a geographer who lived through several dreadful cholera epidemics that ravaged most of the world in the 1800s. At that point, no one knew for sure how cholera spread, and that made the disease especially frightening, and many victims died within a week of infection. Dr. Snow came to believe that contaminated water was to blame, but he didn't have any proof. Now, when the pandemic began in 1842, when it reached England, especially London and Soho, Dr. Snow and his students made a large-scale street map of the area, and they marked a dot in every place where a death had occurred and where each new case was reported. And by the time more than 500 people had died in Soho alone, the map, which is dated 1854, showed a concentration of victims around an intersection on Broad Street. And now he thought about it for a second. There were stores at that intersection, but customers could always walk elsewhere if prices were lower, maybe just a block or two away. Then he thought, when something's free, they always go there. So what is it that's free at that intersection? And what it was a pump for water. That's why there was a cluster of dots around the pump. And the link between contaminated water and cholera was finally confirmed by this map. Now that wasn't the end of the story, because Dr. Snow asked the city to remove the handle from the pump. But they said that people would riot in Soho. They were already angry about the cholera, and if you took away their water, they'd get even more angry. Now Dr. Snow knew they could go to another pump, so he and his students, they did it themselves. They poured lye down the hole, and lye poisoned the water in the well. And soon he had proof as to the efficacy of this approach, because the number of deaths around that intersection plummeted. New cases dropped even more sharply, and what the map had confirmed was proven beyond a doubt. Now the authorities could advise people to boil their water, and they didn't have to worry about touching each other or inhaling bad air, because that was not the cause of cholera. And it was all proven by this map.
I'm trying